Today on Cody in the Cinema, I'm talking about one of my very favorite Westerns, a glorious, underrated black and white gem of a film, something that for me is 5 stars, with terrific performances and awesome desert landscapes. This is called 3:10 to Yuma, directed by Delmer Daves, who you may recognize from films like Dark Passage with Lauren Bacall and Humphrey Bogart. There's a line in here from Ben Wade, an outlaw, a guy who causes all this trouble with his gang, played beautifully, wonderfully by Glenn Ford. He says something like, I don't just go around shooting people down. I work quiet, like you, he tells Van Heflin. And those two make quite the pair in this truly morally gray area kind of story. I know that's talked about a lot. I know we see a lot of grim, dark stuff out there that tries to mess around with that concept, but here was one of the original very best of that kind of genre. Something that I sorely miss in my Westerns. Love these black and white psychological Westerns. This feels like something Anthony Mann or Bud Boetticher could have come up with. So some of you who have that Bud Boetticher collection from the Criterion, or if you have the James Stewart Winchester 73, if you already have that, this is something I think you're really going to enjoy. Now, we know in the beginning we're somewhere in Arizona, and like I said, it's shot all over the state just beautifully. And there are some of the robbers are trying to get to Bisbee. Perhaps there's a cattle owner who has a ranch, and some of his cattle are mixed up in all of this. And Van Heflin, this cattle owner, witnesses something he really shouldn't. The stage hold up, and all of these different events lead to a situation, a scenario, where Ben Wade and this character played by Van Heflin, Dan Evans, are together while he basically has to watch this outlaw, often by himself with just a gun in an empty room, and try not to get outsmarted by the outlaw. It's a lot of talking. Some people have called it a morality play, but I think there's a bit more to it than that. It's such a calm, orderly film. And I think so much of why this works so well comes down to small decisions that mirror that idea with the visual language of the film. So there's an example that happens early on, and I absolutely love this shot. All of Ben Wade's gang, they come into the bar, and the barkeep has no idea who they are. She's cool and collected and lines up shots and slowly, methodically pours each one a glass of whiskey. Well, it's a shot, and they drink it in order, no rush. They all seem to be mirroring Ben Wade's coolness, and they're nice and they're polite to each other. But we can see a kind of tension just below the surface as she continues to pour. But like I said, it's so orderly. It's at times the film is almost pastoral with its surroundings. You forget in a way that there's even a conflict because of how nice of a guy Ben Wade can be. He's extremely accommodating even when he's captured. There is a really good, this is one of my favorite scenes in Westerns. There's a scene where Ben Wade is in the house with his family, and like the kids are there, and he's kind of handcuffed, and the kids are really like being arrogant when they have this outlaw right next to him. But he's just so calm about it. Like he's just talking about the good food he has, and he's just happy to have it. He continually tries to convince people to just let him go, let this thing be, don't get too far involved. And you want to talk about moral gray area. This film walks that line as much as any I have ever seen. Build up is all over the place. It's so well executed. It's so well done. The Ben Wade actually just hums the theme song and whistles it. And I don't know how often that would work, in a movie, but in this movie, the constant build up to the idea that at some point he's going to have to get on the 3:10 to Yuma to presumably be tried or go to prison is there. It's just worked in casually like that, softly, gently, in such an awesome way. Such a crushing film in terms of the economic reality of the characters. You've got Van Heflin there. He's this ranch owner. He doesn't necessarily want to get that far involved with this thing. He doesn't want to have to take an outlaw and move him to another place, another jurisdiction, and help him get on a train and be tried. How much of that is really his problem? What he needs to figure out is how to pay the bills. It comes up all over the place, all the time. Sometimes when a posse needs to be formed or a defense against outlaws, people are reticent to stay and actually follow through with the defense. Many moments like this might remind you of another Western that did something similar called High Noon. Pretty famous one, right? So I actually like this better than High Noon. Personally, I think it has better dialogue and more consistent, a more consistent display of its themes, but High Noon will certainly be the more popular one. Okay? There are so many good moments with, Dan and Ben when they're just jabbering at each other. Van Heflin is he's trying really hard not to like Ben Wade too much. And so some of the conflict is like, how much is that Ben Wade trying to sweet talk him to make him make a mistake while he's being guarded? And how much of that is him genuinely being a nice person? It can be hard to tell. Speaking of that, there's a romance in this film, and I didn't love it the first time. I didn't quite buy it, but now that I've watched the film a few times, there is a romance between two characters that happens very quickly, and there's a quick attraction. And the more I have thought about it, the more I really like it. Because here's a character, one of the cowboys in the film. He comes in, he has lived with a lot of just not a lot of structure. And here's this beautiful woman that they share an instant attraction. And that the way that whole sequence of events plays out, it seems to me like, and it's such an isolated place and living such isolated lifestyles as both those characters do, I can really see it happening, and it actually adds a little something to the film. This film, I like to say that the Outlaws are very different, let's say, than Liberty Valance. They aren't like there's just more order to them. There's more order to the film in general. It's less chaotic than that film from John Ford. There's an idea that's explored early in this film. Lots of terrible things happen. Do I personally have to get involved? Should I have to be the person? Should me, specifically I, have to be the person to get involved in all the terrible things going on around me? Now, a lot of you may be feeling that way looking around at your world right now, and I think that makes this whole thing work even better. A memory that I have that I wanted to share with you to kind of leave you with here. When I was driving, we did a really quick trip from Virginia to Tucson, Arizona with all the saguaros, which are in this film, and they're great and they're used well. We were driving back. We had to drive from Tucson to El Paso and a little bit past that. And that's kind of a long drive. I think it takes 4 to 7 hours. I can't remember exactly how long it takes. And it took, a lot longer to do that because there was this big dust storm. So we had to go really slow. And the whole time I was thinking about how helpless I was and how I just have to kind of crawl and make my way through the isolation. I love that stuff. Just like, I don't know. I liked it more than I think my wife did. But you do feel helpless sometimes out there in the desert. You do feel all alone. But sometimes it's the simple companionship that you find with another person, and that's explored so many times through the film, whether that's Ben and Van Heflin's character, whether that's him and his wife, whether that's these other two and their romance. It's constantly explored. I think this is a film you absolutely should have if you're already a fan of Westerns. If you don't mind those slow, kind of psychological Westerns, this is among the best of those style of Westerns. I must emphasize that. Not a particularly action-oriented film. If you liked any of this today or found it to be helpful, want to do me a favor, click the thumbs up, help YouTube know that, if you like movies, come to Cody in the Cinema. Tell me your thoughts on the film or any other Westerns or anything similar, and subscribe.